I believe Patsy Ramsey was in a religious trance, so to speak, possessed by the devil. She signs the ransom note, Victory, SBTC, shall be the conqueror, or saved by the cross. Or, when they find their Bible, it's open to Psalms 35. Contend, O Lord, with those who contend with me. Take up shield and armor. Brandish spear and javelin. Say unto me, I am your salvation. If she takes the first letters of that stanza and reverses them and creates an acronym, SBTC. Patsy Ramsey lays on JonBenét's body in the living room and screams to her reverend, Jesus saved Lazarus and rose him from the dead. Have him do that for my daughter. Patsy hid behind her faith and her Christianity. That is blasphemy of the highest order against the Holy Spirit. I'm here to do this case for JonBenet, for all of us who live this story saga. And remember, I kill killers. That's what I do.
We brought Chris Todd back around, investigative producer. Last time you and we covered the O.J. Simpson hypotheses you presented, which was fascinating. We got a lot of comments. But today we're going to do a deep dive in a case that really perplexed not only our country, but the world, and that is the JonBenet Ramsey murder, where this beautiful little blue-eyed beauty queen was found slain in the basement of her house on Christmas morning. The whole case has perplexed us. It's baffled us. Boulder, Colorado, affluent neighborhood. John Ramsey's a successful businessman. Patsy Ramsey's a former beauty queen herself. And they were raising two children in beautiful Boulder, Colorado. One was Burke, 9 years old at the time, Burke Ramsey, and beautiful JonBenet, who was 6 years old. And the morning of Christmas morning, she was found in the basement 7 hours after the original call. She has duct tape over her mouth, her hands were corded above her head, and she was also wrapped in a blanket. Tell us what happened that morning.
I will say that this is a unique situation even for me. This case was very hard to stomach and research. Obviously, I lived through this too. I was in college at the time this all happened. I'd like to kind of talk about the parents just briefly and the idyllic setting of Boulder, like you said. I think you hit that on the head. And out of protection for all parties in this is my theory, this is my investigation. If anybody has an issue with it, you come talk to me. My email is investigatorla19@gmail.com. Okay, John and Patsy Ramsey had an amazing life. They were a wealthy couple. You know, John was a very bright guy. He was in the Navy. He was a civil engineer. He had relocated to Atlanta. He was a Midwestern guy from Nebraska and then lived in Michigan. He met Patsy in Atlanta. He started a computer company that was very successful, Access Graphics, which eventually sold to Lockheed Martin. John didn't really have anything bad in his past. There was no criminal activity. There was nothing to say that this guy would ever be involved in something like this at all. Patsy was from West Virginia. She was Miss West Virginia, as was her sister. A couple years later, they were the first sister duo, one of the first duos to ever be in the Miss America pageant at separate times. Patsy was bright, could sing and dance. She was a performer. She was an actress. And she was a lot younger than John. And they had lived in Atlanta for years. And then John was doing part of his business in Boulder, Colorado. And they eventually moved to Colorado. They had only lived there for a few years. They hadn't really been there that long. Burke is their first child, Burke Ramsey, who we're pretty well aware of, and I'm sure his name will come up again. And then JonBenét was born on August 6th, I believe. She was a beautiful little girl, obviously outside and inside. And that's why I want to bring her character to life. She was very mature. A lot of people talked about her maturity. This Santa character, this Bill McReynolds, came home one day after going to the Pearl Street Mall and said, I think I met an angel. And this was 3 years before everything that had happened. And he was hired to be their Santa Claus. And she gave him this little vial of glitter, which she called stardust. And he was always impressed with this. And she walked him around the house and held his hand when he did the first Santa Claus hiring the first year. She was, I think, 4 years old. And he just was really enamored by her. And a lot of other people say these things about JonBenét too. Very mature for age, could sing and dance. Remember, this girl was doing pageants at 4 years old, okay? I couldn't remember the lines to the songs that this 4-year-old's doing. So she obviously was really ahead of her time. And I do believe, possibly, she may have been Miss America at some point. She was groomed for that by her family. And you can see it. She was Miss Colorado, Little Miss Colorado. And she won about 80% of the pageants she was in.
You know, she was described as being a spark plug, just full of personality. And, you know, a lot of people disagree with, you know, the beauty pageants for young children. It can create a different kind of setting for their life going forward. However, it's been on record that JonBenét would drag Patsy to these things, that she really wanted to participate in this. It was part of her personality as a young girl.
I think we see both sides too, because I will, as we go, I want to comment because there's a lot of legends and misconceptions sometimes. I think she was into it, but there's some things that I did find in research and things that JonBenét did say that sometimes I think it was a little burning her out just a little bit with how excessive some of it was and the costumes and but I agree with you. She obviously was into it and there was a passion for it, sure.
Sure. So take us back to that Christmas morning, December 26, 1996, Boulder, Colorado. We're at a picturesque mansion in the beautiful community of Boulder. And we're at the Ramsey house and it's Christmas morning. It's 5 a.m.
Yeah, and I want to just take us back just a little bit because this will be important for some of the evidence that we're going to discuss too. On December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, there was a party at the Ramsey's house. There was about 40 to 50 people there. And on the 24th, JonBenét did an event where she was in the mall and did a performance. So that's Christmas Eve. They go to dinner at their friend's restaurant also on the 24th. On the 25th, Christmas morning, gifts are open. They play with some kids. They have this pancake breakfast with the family. Everything seems so amazing and beautiful. And then they go to the White's house, Fleet White. His house, they have a party late afternoon, like a dinner for Christmas. And this is going to be very important for me to lay out this path that JonBenét is on for these 3 days leading up to the Christmas. If we're brushing ahead to December 26th in the morning, okay, when Patsy Ramsey makes this call at 5:52 a.m. to the 911 call, she reports that there is a kidnapping, okay? So this begins what we call the investigation is December 26th. It's the day after Christmas. And that begins where the police come over and the family, they invite the Whites, Fleet and his wife, the Fernies come over, the Reverend comes over. There's multiple people in this house right away.
Let's play that 911 call for our audience.
911 emergency.
We need him. Police.
What's going on?
By 515th Street.
What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping.
explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old.
How long ago was this?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Patsy Ramsey, I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
Okay, I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been gone?
No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay, girl.
Please, somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Patsy, 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 Patsy.
So obviously, Chris, she's frantic. It's
Which I don't call frantic. I call an act. The call doesn't hang up, okay? And this is something that the detectives find out by taking the footage they actually take it to an aerospace engineer to look at it, and they can't actually decipher that there's another voice in the background. The actual regular recording is easier to hear without all this technical, advanced, machinery looking at it. And they find out that they hear Burke Ramsey in the background.
But Burke was sleeping, Chris.
That's what they say, but he's not.
But he said that he was in bed
His parents say he's
all
in
day.
bed.
But Burke said that as well.
Sure. Well, yeah. So they hear Burke say, "What did you find?" Now, John Ramsey says, "We're not talking to you." He actually says that first. "We're not talking to you." And then Patsy's saying, oh, Jesus, help me, Jesus." Again, with this Christianity, with this whole theme of what I find fascinating, to say that word. And they discover, okay, so Burke's not in his bed at 5:52 a.m. They say he wakes up at 7 a.m. and they usher him out of the house. Well, why are they ushering him out of the house? He's a witness. He's inside the home. So there's a lot of stuff right away that they find out later, okay, and they hide this from the Ramseys also. They don't tell them that they know the call didn't hang up. So we have a slight kind of misdirection right here, right away. So now when the friends come, and Rick French, the first officer's name is Rick French, he shows up to the house and he begins to search the house. He searches every room but the room she's found in, literally. It's called the wine cellar. It has a latch on it. There's like a little wooden latch. He says he pulls on it and he doesn't go in. They ask him later, "Why didn't you go in?" "Well, I'm looking for the exit for the kidnapper because I think it's a kidnapping, not a murder." He doesn't go in the room. That's where she is. Okay? Now, do we want to say God does this or the devil does this or what's the coincidence of this? He says there's not an exit because I saw the latch on the outside. There must be no exit outside. He doesn't open it. Now, what problem does that really cause? Well, we're going to find out that at 1 p.m., John Ramsey is going to carry up JonBenét's body into the foyer, and then Detective Linda Arndt is going to move the body into the living room. So we can see the problem there right away is we have two people touching a murder victim. That's the problem, right? So Rick French tells, when the detectives start to show up at 8 a.m., he says, something's wrong. And they're like, well, what do you mean? He's like, something's not right in the whole setting. Now, Patsy and John are separated from each other. They're not consoling each other. They find this strange, okay? Patsy's kind of hysterical. She's saying, Bible verses and yelling this and that. John's kind of cordial, as Detective Linda Arndt says. He was very cordial, which came strange to me. And the way the whole, so Rick French sees Patsy Ramsey, she's crying like this, and he sees her look through. She's looking through splayed fingers, he calls it. So he's not really paying attention to her, but he keeps noticing as she starts to cry, she peeks through her hands as if it's an act, seeing how he's reacting. So immediately, and I'm not sticking up for the Boulder PD entirely, and we'll get to Detective Steve Thomas and Tom Trujillo and all these guys who pointed at the family right away, but they know something's wrong.
But Chris, you know, everyone mourns differently, man. Everyone reacts to death or something of trauma differently. So okay, but keep going.
Yeah, I understand. And that can be interpreted a number of ways, like we said. But I find it interesting because what I do too is, and I just want to say this in my investigation and how I do these cases, these different books I've written and stories, I give you one lie. I call it the one lie rule. I give you one. Everyone gets that little excuse. They might be hiding something. They don't want to reveal something right away. They might have to hide something. I get it. After that one lie, that's it. If you lie the second time, everything that goes off there, I'm on you like a spotlight. And I'm not coming off you until something clears you that's obvious to me. So, the splayed fingers, the separation of the parents. John Ramsey reads his mail at one time. He's flipping through his mail. She's like, why is he flipping through his mail? He's not behaving like someone. And then when the phone's supposed to ring at 10 a.m. and it doesn't ring, nobody does anything.
And let's unpack that for our audience.
But do you see what I mean about the lies and the deception? I start to see it.
If you are anticipating a ransomer to call you in a ransom note,
aren't you waiting by the phone?
You're right by that phone and you're glued to it.
And they're not.
Okay. So when the phone call didn't come between the hours of 8 and 10 per the ransom notes.
And they say it might have been the next day. Sorry to cut you off. They say it might have been the next day because on the ransom note, it says tomorrow. And they don't know what time, right? So if she's kidnapped at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., what's tomorrow? It's the They have all these excuses, man. I'm telling you, they got everything you're going to say and everything that everybody says, they're going to have that rebuttal. Everything's so convenient for them. It all works out for them.
So between the hours of 8 and 10 a.m., either that day, the detectives are sitting there observing, going, you know, the call didn't come. Are you concerned? I mean, and you're saying it was business as usual, but, you know, one could argue with you, Chris, it's just, man, it's trauma. There is no set way you react to trauma. Everyone personalizes it differently, but keep going.
And what I was just going to say there is I go by feel. I'm not a big DNA guy, and I know we're going to bring up the DNA, and I'm going to give you my explanations. But what I'm saying is I'm not a big DNA guy. I'm not a big carpet fiber guy, like I always say this, and I go by feel. If I feel you are hiding something, I'm on you. I'm not the cops. I can't arrest you. We get it, right? And everyone wants to downplay what I do. Oh, you know, he's trying to sell a book, or no, I'm trying to solve a murder. I'm trying to bring justice to victims and speak for those who cannot speak. The Ramseys showed me nothing. In all the research I did, the deep dive, all the books, the movies, the Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, Lawrence Schiller's book, the Ramseys' own book, The Death of Innocence. Go read their book. Go look at what they say in there. It's foul, okay? They make a bunch of excuses up. They lie about things that I catch them lying about in the book, and I knew they would. I knew they would spit things out that don't make any sense. They said Santa Claus did it. They said Bill McReynolds did it.
McReynolds was cleared. We all know that.
But they said Santa did it. He was the killer. They said Fleet White killed her. Okay, they threw out all these things, and oh, there's somebody, you know, there was this pervert down the street. Well, what about the parents?
Walk us down 7 hours later when Mr. Ramsey finds JonBenét, his daughter. He finds her with duct tape on her mouth. Her hands are bound over her head, and she's wrapped in a white blankie, correct?
Yes, with her Barbie nightgown. That's her favorite Barbie nightgown. How would the killer know to put that in there?
Right. Well, did she go
How
to
would
bed?
he know
Did
where to
she
get
go to
that?
bed in her Barbie nightgown?
No, she did not.
Okay. She didn't go to bed in her Barbie nightgown. So you're theorizing that was put on her post-mortem?
It's not put on her, it's inside the blanket. It's like it's with her.
Okay.
And the FBI makes a comment and says that's a telltale sign right there of that killer most likely is a family member inside that house. Giving care, they know it's her favorite thing and they're placing it with her.
Okay. There were also 2 marks on JonBenét's body that could be consistent with an air stun gun.
I understand.
But there was also a train set that little Burke played with. And when you take off you disconnect the 2 train rails.
Right.
the spacing of the male connectors fit the same 2 dots on JonBenet.
Correct.
What is your theory there?
Lou Smit is the one who drives the stun gun theory, okay?
And Lou Smit was a detective that was not with the Boulder PD. He was brought on as a
Colorado
consultant.
Springs.
He was brought on from Colorado Springs, and he's a very well-decorated homicide investigator.
Correct. And he comes on to help. He runs one of the interrogations. I believe it's in 98. He does the second one with John Ramsey. And I'll say this about Lou Smit. When he came on the case, and Steve Thomas talks about this in his book, JonBenet, Lou Smit was on the case for 72 hours. He hadn't read all the materials. And he goes, the parents are innocent. And so Steve Thomas and Tom Trujillo, they kind of look at each other and they're starting to talk to Lou Smit. And this goes on for a year. Why do you think the parents are innocent? He never wavered 1 minute. He was barely on the case, and he says they're innocent. And he stuck to that theory. He kept driving it, even though all the evidence, fiber evidence, fingerprints, DNA, a lot of it kept pointing to one of the parents. So he is that whole setup with I think, to me, the train track makes more sense than the stun gun. The stun gun doesn't fit exactly. It's off a little bit, and they're not considered burn marks in the autopsy. They're considered abrasions.
So who prodded her with the train track set?
When we're ready to go for that, we'll go into how I think the murder happened in the end.
Okay. So Mr. Ramsey finds her body, and then where does he take the body, Chris?
So Detective Linda Arndt sees that he's antsy. His demeanor has changed. She lost track of him for about an hour. She didn't know where he was. This is part of the bumbling of the Boulder PD. We don't know where he is. Is he walking in the house? Did he see that her body was in there and he gets upset? Was he not involved in the murder at all? Like, did he really think she was kidnapped? Why does his demeanor change so much that she mentions? So she says to him, because he's pacing around, it's 1 o'clock, she tells Fleet White and John, go look to the house, top to bottom, not the bottom up, top to bottom, see if anything's out of place. She wanted him to have something to do. Where does he run? Straight to the basement.
But that's the bottom, Chris.
I understand.
Yeah.
That's fine. So he runs straight to the basement with Fleet White, and they look around. Now here's an important part. Fleet White says, I saw the window, it was closed. It wasn't locked, but it was closed. It wasn't open. This window that supposedly, Lou Smit climbs through and does this whole charade. He actually moves the suitcase also.
But the story that has been reported was that some windows were open to allow cables for the Christmas lights to flow through to the basement power. What are your thoughts about that?
Those windows, the windows I'm talking about, I'm focused, no cables come through those windows. So I'm talking about the 3 windows, the famous picture of the window open with the suitcase and the smudge on the wall. Well, let's remember, John Ramsey tells the detectives, in the summer I kicked out the window because I locked myself out of the house. So guess who comes through that window in the summer? John Ramsey. He comes through, he scuffs with his shoe. He says he takes his clothes off because he didn't want to rip them or he couldn't fit through the window. That's his shoe in the summer of 96, creating that scuff. Fleet White moves the suitcase to where it's actually found. It actually wasn't there. This is the big misconception. This is super important that there's a witness to say that window is not open in the morning.
Why would Fleetwood move the suitcase?
He says he sees a shard of glass that he pulls off the shard and he lays it on the windowsill. He also moves the suitcase. I don't know why.
Maybe just stand on it to grab the shard?
No, you can just reach up and grab it.
Okay.
It's not, but and I don't know every detail down there, but Fleet White's one of the first people at the house in the morning. He's one of the only people that's down there, period. Okay, so that was a big thing for me in my notes and all my writings with this was, oh, there it is. This window was not open. John opens it a couple hours later. And to be honest, what I think really happened is John and Patsy didn't fully stage the break-in. There's no footprints in snow. There's no forced entry. None.
Yeah, well, explain the high-tech.
Sure.
It was a high-tech boot, like a hiking boot.
In the wine cellar on the mold.
That was found on the mold in the wine cellar. Whose footprint was that?
I don't know. But I'll say this. What kind of boots do cops wear? high tech. How many cops were in that room? Many. Detective Tom Trujillo also states some guys wouldn't submit their boot size and they wouldn't show us their boots. They wouldn't do it.
Why not?
I don't know. Tom talks about that. He says, so even Steve Thomas says, we didn't have all the boots of all the police that were there. There were a lot of people at that house. And also, when Dr. Phil interviews Burke Ramsey, he brings up this boot print too. And Burke says, well, I owned a bunch of hiking boots too. I mean, I could have been me in there.
Yeah, but you're right. High Tech is a law enforcement boot. We all know the brand.
You know?
And it's a distinctive.
And there's not like mold all over the floor. Okay. I've seen the pictures. There's this one area, okay? And also, there's 3 fingerprints and palm prints on the door that belong to Patsy Ramsey.
Why wouldn't they? She lives in the home.
I understand, and I already knew you were going to say that, okay? And then when I say Patsy and John's DNA's on JonBenét, you're going to say...
It's her daughter.
Thank you.
When Mr. Ramsey, John Ramsey, finds his poor slain daughter behind that latch door inside the basement, which was kind of a de facto wine cellar, what does he do with the body?
He picks it up, which is the worst thing you can possibly do, which we know, right? And probably John Ramsey knew that too. He takes the duct tape off her mouth, right there. He starts to undo the ropes, the cords. So guess what he's doing? Putting his DNA on the duct tape, on the cords. I'm just...
But Chris,
this is what people don't want to hear.
But it's not about what I want to hear or what you're proposing. It's about what any man would do if you saw your daughter bound. You would want to release her from those restraints, dead, alive, whatever. It would be your first initial reaction. Fuck the evidence. You want her unbound. So I
respect that.
Okay, so...
But I don't believe it.
Let's unpack it differently. Are you suggesting Mr. John Ramsey purposely contaminated the scene by virtue of touching JonBenét post-mortem?
I'll give you a 50-50.
Okay. He grabs her body, he unbounds her, he releases the duct tape from his beautiful little daughter. Mm-hmm. Where does he take the body?
He carries up the body, and I guess if you watch the movie Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, which is an important movie, and Lawrence Schiller directed it, he wrote the book with the same title. It's very important. I will promote that movie a little bit. There's a lot of factual evidence in there. And he really does chronicle the entire journey. It's an important piece of television, I will say this.
Okay.
He carries her almost like, not a wedding carry, but like from the waist, like a doll. He carries her up. They show him like this. I've read that he's carrying her like that by the waist.
Up the flight of stairs.
Up the flight of stairs. She weighs 45 pounds.
And where does he lay her?
He lays her in the foyer. Right when he comes up the stairs, he drops her right there by the door. Detective Linda Arndt, which makes the huge mistake of picking up her body and moves it to the living room by the Christmas tree. She has psych issues after this. She claims amnesia. This is all in Steve Thomas's book, JonBenét. There's other books that talk about this, Jane Kohler. And she claims later, I don't remember anything from December 26th, don't ask me, because she knows she messed up. Okay.
She messed up, but...
Tell me, let's just talk real quickly about this.
Well,
You're a detective. Okay. You're a cop. Do you pick up a dead body?
Not at all. But let's talk about Boulder PD. This is a schlocky little, police department. Mm-hmm. They're not set up for a homicide investigation. They didn't have the training. In fact, the 2 detectives on the case are still with the Boulder PD. It's not a high pace, high homicide. It's not like LAPD or NYPD. Sure. This is a little town in Colorado. So they're not equipped to handle these homicide investigations. And there was some definite fumbles along the way, i.e. the whole place should have been roped down. Mm-hmm. The Ramseys should have been interviewed separately, but we're not going to dive into that. What we're going to talk about is the 7 hours after little JonBenét was found dead, killed. The autopsy report in '97 of January that came out discusses that she had suffered not only strangulation, but blunt trauma force to her head, and the x-ray was a pretty big hit.
8 inches.
8 inches. What are you suggesting as the blunt object that struck little JonBenét?
I do believe it is the Maglite flashlight. Now, there's a lot of questions about, was it rubber coated? Was it not rubber coated? The handle was rubber coated. The way I would say it is this. Dr. Werner Spitz grabs a cadaver of a child, okay, because he had the ability to do this, and he strikes that cranium with the exact same Maglite flashlight in a test, and it leaves the exact same injury. The bone, she's hit in the front, means she's looking at the assailant. Strikes down, I believe, as we'll do. I believe JonBenét turns away. She sees it coming and she turns away, and that's why it strikes her on her right side of her head. Okay, because I don't believe it's a left-handed assailant. I believe it's a right-handed assailant. Okay, I believe it is the Maglite flashlight. That thing is heavy. That does not take. You get that thing moving and coming down with gravity, and that girl's 6 years old, you absolutely could split her head open with that. And the skin's not broken. Now, am I gonna go run a test on a human being and smack him in the head and see if it breaks the skin or not? No, I'm not. Do I know for a fact that skin should have been broken? I don't know.
So you believe it was a flashlight. Now, was the flashlight native to the house when it was found? Did Patsy and John say, yeah, that's our flashlight?
They don't say that at first. They try to say they have no idea how it got there. Now, later on, in one of her interrogations, she says, yeah, John did have a flashlight like that.
Okay, so
I think my son, our son gave it to him, and there's supposedly two of them. Now, remember...
Wait, let's back up. Why would a 9-year-old kid named Burke Ramsey give mom and dad...
Not him, John Andrew Ramsey, the first child from John's first marriage. And, John was a pilot. Okay, literally was a pilot. And so she says, well, we kept it under the bar, the bench. She says there was a flashlight like that. Now, that flashlight is found on the kitchen counter, out of place, lens side down. They don't know where it is. They ask the cops, whose is this? Oh, it's not ours. I don't know how it got there. Just like the bowl of pineapple. Patsy and John say they have no idea how it got there. So again, here comes the deception. Now, to stick up for some of the Ramsey, train, there's no fingerprints on the flashlight or in the batteries that they find. But then people say, well, that material is not conducive to leaving a fingerprint on the metal. I don't know. I'm not a forensic pathologist. I don't know all of it. I'm just saying, because when I paint that picture of this murder, that flashlight is the blunt force trauma.
Right. In 1997, when the coroner did his investigation, he found undigested amounts of pineapple in little JonBenét's body. So she may have helped herself to a midnight snack and grabbed some pineapple in the bowl.
I don't think she did it herself. She's 6 years old. I mean, it's going to be the parents who are in Patsy's fingerprints are on the bowl.
Okay. Patsy's fingerprints are probably on every bowl in the house.
You see, here we go. Yeah. And I'm not directing anything at you.
No,
what I'm saying is, but this is, I want to make this real quick statement based on other cases I've done too. And I'm not to be morbid here. Let's say I kill my child in my house, right? Is my DNA going to work for me or against me? It's going to work for me.
Sure.
That's my house. That's my kid. And barring some bloody fingerprint on the neck or a rape or a sexual assault that we won't get into too much, but that's the only thing that's going to pitch. That's where I live.
You bring up DNA, and I know you're not as you say, a carpet fiber guy, but the fact of the matter is, under JonBenét's fingernail and also on her underwear was the DNA of an unknown male. How do you explain away that, Chris?
Okay. All of us as human beings are shedding and accumulating DNA every minute. If you and I were to talk to each other across the table, within 30 seconds, I'd have enough saliva on that table to run your profile. 30 seconds, okay? So if JonBenét goes to a party on the 23rd and is around 40 to 50 people, and she's playing with other kids, and some of those kids are boys, and she gets patted on the back, or she shakes the hand, and she touches her own clothes, or she transfers it in some way, right? And then there's a party at the Fleet White's house, and she goes there on literally the day of Christmas, okay? And she's with a bunch of people. Then she's in the mall on the 24th, and there's a bunch of people there. Now, what's the half-life of DNA? 500 years. They test DNA that shows animals can be 500,000 to 1,000,000 years old. The DNA, if it's preserved, if it's buried, even touch DNA, which is called trace DNA, that can take like 10 cells, all you need to get a profile, okay? JonBenét's DNA that's under her fingernails, or it's on the cord, or it's on her underwear and her long johns, what I'm saying is it's not the killer's DNA. There is a multitude of people. If we do an exponential math equation here of all the people, she met 50 people there, 50 over here.
But on her underwear, Chris, I mean,
okay,
come on.
but hold on. What's transferred DNA? She's got it on her hands, right? And she puts on her clothes. As one guy says online, I think that DNA is a Taiwanese boy who packaged the underwear, and he was in a sweatshop, and his sweat or saliva hit the underwear. I understand, but I'm saying is, how new is this underwear? Where'd it come from? So DNA lasts a long time, especially if it's saliva, tissue, the buccal, they call it, when they swab your inside of your mouth. Why are they doing that? They want your saliva and your tissue. Those are the two best things. It's better than blood. So that's all I'm saying. We're not going to go on this tirade about the DNA, and all the people will comment and they'll come at me, and that's fine. I'm saying that DNA is not the killer's DNA, and that is a ruse. That is a ruse by Mary Lacey in 2008 to say the Ramseys are cleared because there's this unknown male DNA. Yeah, what about John Ramsey's DNA all over and Patsy? Well, they live there. See, this is what I mean. It's going to be all super convenient.
So the DNA is something that you're throwing out of your hypothesis.
Let me ask you this one too. How to work out? How to work out? The DNA you have, how to work out? Whose is it? You don't know, right? Did you run it? No. Oh, did you? Maybe you did. Guess what? It didn't hit to anybody, right? In 08, who did it hit? Nobody, because there is nobody it's going to hit.
Well, not everyone's in the DNA database either, Chris.
I understand.
Okay. So
do you see my point, though?
Sure.
If they say they have DNA, then who did it hit?
It cleared several suspects, one of which was Santa Claus. Unfortunately, he got splashed.
Gary Oliva got cleared from it supposedly, and then so did John Mark Carr, right? So I pose to all of you people out there that drive this DNA crap that show me whose DNA it is. And we can do a debate about it. You want to do a bet on it? I'll bet you they never find anyone to match that DNA.
Has the Boulder Police Department released that DNA to a third party for analysis?
There, 6 years ago, Channel 9 News took 3 geneticists, whatever you want to call them, scientists, and they said that they got the file from the DA's office, and they said that is a mix of multiple people. That is not a single profile. It is weak, it is small, and when they actually do test it, it will destroy it.
In January of '98, both Patsy and John Ramsey refused a second round of interviewing from Boulder PD, and I don't blame them for refusing a second round of an investigative interrogation.
They are interviewed in 08. They do 2 rounds. So in '97, Tom Trujillo and Steve Thomas get the first crack at them. Okay. In '98, which is what you're talking about, Lou Smith takes John Ramsey, and Detective Haney takes Patsy Ramsey. So they do 2 separate interviews because they get Mark Beckner comes in. He's the new police chief. This case was tried twice. There's 2 circles of it, which you know. Now, I'll just say this real quickly. The Ramseys are not cooperative in the beginning. They do not agree to any interviews. They lawyer up within 2 days. So they do not do their first interview until 4 months later in April. That's documented. So what they say in their book, and they list, here's our chronicle of cooperation. No, they do not cooperate.
Well, would you cooperate if you were being accused of killing your daughter and you didn't?
Would you want to look for the person that killed your child, right? Wouldn't you lean on the police and want to find out who did it? Why would you lawyer up?
Look, Chris, John Ramsey is a sophisticated businessman. Of course he's going to lawyer up. You would too.
They had separate attorneys, actually. One for Patsy and one for John. Does that look suspicious to you? Yes or no?
I don't know. You know, John Ramsey's a businessman. Of course, he's going to, the immediate knee-jerk reaction for any businessman, if they're talking to police, you lawyer up. I don't care who, what, when, where.
I respect that.
So, you know, I think that has to be explained away that way. But in October of 1999, the DA declares there's no indictments on the Ramseys. Why do you think the DA made that call?
And I'm glad you brought it up, because it's time. 4 words for why this case was never prosecuted. Alex Hunter, Pete Hofstrom, the 2 DAs. Alex Hunter was the top guy. Pete Hofstrom was like number 2. They had Trip DeMuth, Bill Wise, okay? You guys didn't prosecute it. Now, let's watch this. So they do a grand jury. Why do they do a grand jury? Because Steve Thomas resigns on JonBenét's birthday, literally, with a scathing letter against the Boulder PD, the DA's office, all the drama between them. Then Alex Hunter says, and the governor has to step in, and they have to say, we're going to do a grand jury now within 6 weeks. That's the end of story. Where this looks so bad, right? Damage control. So Steve Thomas, who I think is partly a hero, John Ramsey hates him, and Larry King, they did the interview. He triggers that grand jury. Now watch this. So they do the grand jury for a year. Like you said, because it started in 98, right after he goes in August on her birthday. He goes to a press conference, does a press conference and goes, they're not coming back and there will be no charges filed, okay? When do they release these documents that finally show that the grand jury actually did vote to indict Patsy and John Ramsey as child neglect, putting a child in a dangerous situation resulting in death? Is that a murder 1 charge? Not really, right? It's kind of a 2nd degree child abuse, but stay with me. When does that document get revealed? You know how long? 14 years later. What's up? Again, deception, hiding evidence, and imagine those grand jury people like, oh, I thought we voted to indict. They did vote to indict. They never let the public know. Alex Hunter's a fraud. I want to look into your camera, but I won't. Pete Hofstrom and Alex Hunter, you're the reason. And you guys want to do a debate? Come on out and let's do it. Because I want to say this real quick. They do a presentation. And guess who's in the audience? Dr. Henry Lee, Barry Scheck, our old boys. The DA's there. The FBI's there. They do this huge presentation for hours at the Coors Center, they call it, I think. All the detectives give their evidence because they're trying to get the indictment, right? Okay. After they do this huge presentation, the DA, Alex Hunter and Pete Hofstrom, guess who they say they want to start looking at? Take a wild guess. Ho, ho, ho. Santa Claus is back. So these cops put in almost 2 years of investigation, do this whole presentation in front of the most famous pathologists, 2 of them, Scheck and lawyer and pathologist, and Dr. Henry Lee. They do all this effort, put all this energy into it, and literally the DAs walk out of there and a couple days or weeks later, they go, get back on Santa Claus, Bill McReynolds. It's a farce. I'm sorry, it is. And that's why Steve Thomas retired from the police department and wrote a book called JonBenét and got sued by the Ramseys, and he actually lost.
Fast forward to June 2006, Patsy Ramsey, may she rest in peace, dies of ovarian cancer. And this whole thing is kind of now fatiguing the American public, the international world. It's run its course through the news cycle. And a really strange character pops up that same year in August, a guy named John Mark Karr. Tell us a little bit about John Mark Karr.
I mean, I think that whole thing was a ruse. You know, he didn't know JonBenét. He wasn't there. And whether the DNA clears him or not, like I said, I'm not hot on this DNA evidence. He was a ruse. He was a fraud. This Gary Olivas is a fraud. This is a ruse. So I don't really give any credence to anything that. And if you notice, Did you notice the media spectacle that happened when they said, oh my God, this guy out in Thailand or Bangladesh or wherever he is, oh, he's a pedo, and he said he knew John Bonet, and they get the cameras and they fly him out and they do all this stuff. It's like, why don't you guys look? People ask me, because I've consulted some people on this before I came out here, well, what evidence do you have that the parents did it? Did you forget the little part that a 6-year-old girl was tortured and murdered in their house with them home? Are we forgetting that tiniest little part? So I'm trying to say, like, it got messed up right away. Like, it needed to start with the most obvious thing. I did another case where 2 girls were found in a guy's backyard. Well, what evidence do you have that he did it? Besides them being found in his yard?
You know, let's do this. Let's read the ransom note right now. This ransom note, you know, addressed to Mr. Ramsey, is really the tail of the tape. It's obvious it was a botched kidnapping gone wrong, and the kidnappers accidentally killed Jean Bonet and shoved her body deep in the wine cellar, and it just didn't go the way they thought it would go, and they aborted mission, man.
Well, the FBI, so they do this meeting in Quantico, literally, in September of, I believe, 97. And they bring out the detectives, they bring the couple of DAs. Alex Hunter doesn't go. He says there's a half-baked loaf. It's not fully cooked. He's not going to go. He tells him he's going, then he doesn't show up. They go to the FBI, they bring in CASCU, Child Abduction Serial Killer Unit. They call it, that's its acronym. CASCU, however you want to say it. And the FBI says this ransom note is fake. Based on all our evidence with the FBI, you know, we have your daughter, give us the money or she dies. These are the type of notes kidnappers leave. Not 2.5-page books, correct? Okay, so I want to make that real clear. And Lou Smith was actually in that meeting. He doesn't say a word. Because he's Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey innocent, he doesn't say a word. Detective Steve Thomas talks about that. Keeps saying Lou didn't say a word because the FBI kept saying, this is not true, this ransom is not real, okay? So I'll go into some of it, okay. Listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. Is this Die Hard? Hans and Carl? What foreign faction is in Boulder, Colorado? I don't know if Ramsey's a spy or who knows.
Look, he did a lot of defense work, a lot of defense contract.
I know. Here it comes, Lockheed Martin. We're going to get these conspiracy people. Here they come. We respect your business, but not the country it serves.
We do respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier delivery pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The 2 gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions, and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us. Use that good southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now. Victory, SBTC.
There's a lot of people who have analyzed the ransom note. I had to read other people's thoughts, and I like to, when I work a case or I try to solve a murder, I want to hear what other people have to say. Absolutely. People dedicated their life to this story. They did. Authors, journalists, conspiracy guys and gals, bloggers. How many true crime podcasts have shown JonBenét Ramsey? Why don't you solve a murder and stop trolling her death for profit, for clicks? That's what I say. What I'm doing, no one's doing what I do, okay? And I'm not saying that in an arrogant way. They're not doing what I'm doing. But when we're talking about this ransom note, it's ridiculous. I'm sorry. So you mean to tell me that this terrorist in Boulder, Colorado, walked around the house, nobody heard him, there's no forced entry, there's no shoe prints, there's no prints in the freshly drifted snow, nothing. He just appeared in there, then he sat in there after he kills her in the basement. Nobody wakes up, and he sits there and grabs her pen out of the container and writes this 2.5-page ransom note. Not buying it.
I'm suggesting that Mr. Ramsey was involved in a lot of military contracts. The person who wrote this had some connection to him, knew him, obviously.
Is he a spy? Is he a Navy SEAL?
No, but he's pissed off somebody, and the person or persons snuck into the house through the basement. They quietly went up to JonBenét's room. They stunned her. She may have struggled. They struck her, and then they found that she was lifeless. And before doing so, they grabbed a pad and a Sharpie and wrote.
They sat there for 30 to 45 minutes at least to write this letter.
Maybe they wrote it in 10.
And also there's practice notes on her pad. It was Patsy's pad, and there's torn out pages that they prove that she was throwing away other pages. And there's a practice that says Mr. and Mrs. with the R starting to be made. They found that page. So someone practiced it. Okay. The handwriting experts say she meshes certain letters together all the time. It's all throughout there. You can look for yourself. I always challenge people, look for yourself. Look at it yourself and tell me she didn't write that.
Then why did handwriting analysis people clear her?
Only from their side. Only from John Ramsey's side. Everyone that thought John and Patsy were guilty are unprofessional. They have no integrity. They made racist comments about one of the gals who did the reading of the ransom note. John Andrew Ramsey likes to chime in and protect his family. Why is it that everyone thinks only the people that are hired by John Ramsey thinks he didn't do it? Everybody else, FBI, all the cops, all the detectives, even the DA's office had to admit at one time she most likely wrote it.
Okay.
And let me say this last thing too, not to be morbid. Terrorists, some killer, they would have murdered everybody in that house. They wouldn't have just grabbed this little girl out of her bed. Everybody in the house would have been murdered. If this is a foreign faction, and if it was a real kidnapping, why aren't they taking her out of the house? Oh, wait, it was botched. JonBenét weighed 45 pounds. She was like 3'10". She fought off the terrorists. They couldn't handle her. Come on, man.
Okay. So
they got to abort the plan, guys. We can't. She just karate kicked us. Like, come on, man. She can be fit in a duffel bag. This is a joke.
Okay. What you're suggesting, however, is also too heavy to even wrap anyone's mind around. That, you know, when someone kills someone, there's a motive, right? Whether it's a gang-related shooting, he's from the ops, I'm going to kill him, or he owed me money. Why would Patsy kill her sweet little daughter who she poured all her love into? How can you even explain that, Chris?
I wish she didn't. I wish we weren't here talking about it. I wish this child didn't get tortured and bludgeoned and strangled to death. I do. But I'll say this about what your point is about when other people have motives, whether they're killing for money or they're strategic. You know what they all have in common? Anger. It's anger. And that's why Steve Thomas said there was a toileting issue. She kept wetting her bed all the time. This was well documented.
All kids wet their bed.
I understand. Chris. I'm not saying there was sexual abuse. They try to say bedwetting is a sign of sexual abuse. I'm not pointing at that. And I believe that the sexual abuse that there's evidence of was a punishment thing. I don't believe it to be sexual in nature. It's either the staging of the crime or it's a punishment tool. I believe JonBenét was unconscious when that part actually happened. So I think there's anger, and I think Patsy snapped. And to be honest, this is why I talked about it in the very beginning. She's in a religious trance. She is somewhat possessed by the devil, by a demon. Something came over her. And you're absolutely right. It's hard to fathom someone doing that. But I'm telling you this right now, there's over 50,000 kids a year that are killed by their parents worldwide. There's over 500 children a year in America that are killed by their parents, one or both of them. She's not the first one, and she won't be the last.
So you're suggesting Patsy bludgeoned her own little daughter, and you're suggesting that she staged this to look like it was a failed kidnapping attempt.
Absolutely.
And your evidence is primarily built into the
Motive means an opportunity first. Secondly, child dead found in your basement where you are. If I found a child in your house, you're a suspect, period. Until you prove to me, and Patsy never proved to the detectives, to the FBI, she never proved, lose the DNA farce, her fingerprints weren't here and there. Was she wearing gloves? I don't know. She had 5 hours to clean up. If JonBenét's dead at the autopsy says she's dead at 1:23 a.m., 13:23 on the 26th. That gives her over 4 hours to clean up. And in these murder cases, in fights, in these instances of death-defying situations, seconds are like minutes and minutes are like forever.
Chris, we heard the 911 call earlier from Patsy. There's no way you could fake that type of hysterical sensation, man. I'm sorry.
Where are we at right now? LA. What do they do in Hollywood? They act. What does everybody do? They act. And if you're going to protect your ass, to be honest, Patsy was a professional performer. She was Miss West Virginia. She got one of the awards, top 12. They gave her a special plaque. I watched it. She knows what she's doing. Look, I'm not saying she's a dumb lady. I'm saying she's cunning. Okay? God made the serpent more dangerous and crafty than all the other wild animals. Okay? Some of us are crafty. And I see it in these people, man. I'm telling you, I'm not trying to brag and I did this case, I solved that. I'm telling you right now, I could see it. And when I sniff it out, I'm on you.
Look, whether we agree with your hypothesis or not, it is you are this is what you do. You are an investigative producer. I
write books about it. I may write the book, Mommy and Daddy Dearest. I don't know yet. Okay, we'll see. I want to see what happens, and hopefully we can light a brush fire that maybe someone can come forward. I don't know. Look, Patsy died, okay, in 2006. She's gone. John's not going to live much longer, okay? There's never going to be a trial. There's never going to find anyone for that DNA. And I actually hope they find someone for that DNA. I do, because I want them to see when that person goes, I lived in Canada, here's where I was, and some random person at a party, or who knows, familial DNA, who that attaches to.
Well, as we approach the 25th anniversary of this horrible tragedy, there's been a lot
Well, we'll be on, 2096, we're going to be on the 27th anniversary.
Is it the 27th?
Yeah,
okay.
27th, yeah.
So look, 2 decades later, almost 3, we're still scratching our heads going, is there a killer on the loose? Is there a pedophile that attacked this woman? Did Mr. Ramsey get involved with a foreign group that had a grudge against him? Because the ransom letter certainly seemed personal. You're suggesting Patsy, in a fit of rage, accidentally may have killed her, and hence... And
I don't say... I mean, look, I believe the bludgeoning is first, okay? And they'll argue about it from John Ramsey's camp. She's struck first. When she is strangled, she's still alive, okay? The coroner says that. There's multiple experts that say that. She is still alive. I believe she's knocked unconscious, and I can go into this. She's knocked unconscious with the flashlight, and then in the fit of rage, Patsy strangles her. And then stages, moves the body. She's not killed in that wine cellar. She's not. She's killed in the boiler room. That's where the paint tray is. That's where the painting stuff is. That's where the train tracks are nearby. That's all that stuff is there. There's a cement floor. That's why the woman, Melody Stanton, hears a scream across the street, a blood-curdling scream between 12 a.m. and 2 a.m. and says, I heard this piercing scream for 3 to 5 seconds. I believe that right there is JonBenét being attacked by Patsy. And then she's seeing this come down, and she's gonna turn, scream and turn, and then the scream just stops abruptly because she is knocked out right there. Then is the choking, the strangling, and the sexual assault with the paintbrush to make it seem, and look, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. I'll say it's the staging part. Maybe, do we know when JonBenét screamed what was actually happening? We don't. We probably never will know. I don't think John Ramsey killed JonBenét. JonBenét is not asleep when they get home. That's a complete lie by Patsy and John, a colluded story, and even John in the beginning tells 3 detectives that he read a book to JonBenét before she went to bed. JonBenét comes home from the Christmas party at the Whites and is hungry because she probably didn't eat much, and if she did eat cracked crab at the Whites at 5 or 6 p.m., that might still leave her feeling hungry at 10 p.m. So Patsy and John feed JonBenét a bowl of pineapple and milk right when they get home. Afterwards, JonBenét changes into her pajamas or nightwear, but is still wearing that Silver Star long sleeve shirt. A red turtleneck sweater is put over her, hence why Patsy says she put that on her in the very beginning of the description to detectives on December 26th. JonBenét is then put to bed, and John reads her a book for a couple of minutes. It is now approximately 11 p.m. John Ramsey goes to bed and lies that Patsy is already in bed. She's not. She has not changed her clothes, and this is why John is elusive when the police ask him in one of his interrogations, what was Patsy wearing in bed? And he says he doesn't remember. Patsy packs for the trip planned for tomorrow. They're supposed to leave very early to go to Michigan. Patsy is tired. She's agitated. Things have been brewing for a long time with JonBenét, with the bedwetting, the toileting issues, constantly changing the sheets and bedding. Even fecal matter has been expelled at times. It's the holidays, it's stressful, it's active. They have an early flight. She's not gonna sleep much, so something is in the air. And Patsy was a strange, sometimes creepy person in general. At around 1 a.m., Patsy goes to check on JonBenét, hoping that maybe she hasn't wet the bed tonight, nor soiled her underwear or long johns. But that's not the case. JonBenét has completely wet her underwear and her long johns again. Patsy grows extremely frustrated, and JonBenét is not being cooperative at all. Patsy drags JonBenét into her personal bathroom and rips the red turtleneck off of her and tosses it on the sink counter. Patsy pulls down JonBenét's pants and wipes her private area rather forcefully with a blue or black towel, leaving behind these balls of polyester cotton fibers. JonBenét either says some snide remark or argues or fights with Patsy, and this sends Patsy over the edge. Patsy grabs JonBenét by the arm or hair, or picks her up and brings her downstairs, heading for the basement, which I call the dungeon. She grabs the Maglite flashlight on the way, or the Maglite flashlight is already downstairs in the boiler room or train room or wine cellar. Patsy is choking JonBenét with the collar of her Silver Star long sleeve shirt, leaving abrasions on JonBenét's neck. Patsy begins to assault JonBenét downstairs in the boiler room, stabbing her with a train track on the side of the face and on her back, not a stun gun. Patsy is in the boiler room while attacking JonBenét. This is a violent struggle, and Patsy eventually is pinning JonBenét down onto the cement. And this is when JonBenét screams bloody murder, and neighbor Melody Stanton hears this for 3 to 5 seconds, and it suddenly stops. JonBenét sees Patsy raising that Maglite flashlight with the lens side out, and JonBenét slightly turns away to her left, and Patsy strikes down onto her right side of her skull, creating an 8-inch fracture but not breaking the skin. Is this flashlight rubber coated? Some say yes, some say partially. Werner Spitz does an experiment with a child cadaver, and the wound is almost identical to that of the Maglite flashlight. JonBenét is facing Patsy while lying on the ground. JonBenét is now knocked unconscious, but Patsy is not finished. She's going to kill her. Whether we call this staging a sexual assault or deliberately committing the penetration with the broken portion of the paintbrush, it doesn't matter. JonBenét is still alive when this sexual assault abuse takes place. Based on the autopsy, forensic evidence, and multiple doctors and pathologists agree to this. Patsy breaks a long paintbrush into 3 pieces and uses the brush side portion to assault JonBenét's genitalia. Patsy then pulls JonBenét's pants and underwear back up, leaving a small piece of cellulose from the paintbrush inside JonBenét. Patsy grabs one of the remaining 2 pieces of broken paintbrush and some cord that is very close by and in the paint tray and makes the garret. Patsy rolls JonBenét over and wraps the cord around JonBenét's neck first in a rush and in a rage, and possibly a fugue state. Hence why JonBenét's hair gets caught in the knot of the garret. Patsy then pushes down on JonBenét as she pulls the garret or noose tighter and tighter until JonBenét ceases breathing. Once JonBenét is dead, Patsy may take some time to clean up, then wrap JonBenét in the white blanket, and she even goes and gets the Barbie nightgown and places it with her. Patsy cleans off the garret and the paintbrush scraps and will eventually rid the duct tape roll and paintbrush and cord roll, which will never be found. Patsy eventually places JonBenét in the wine cellar on the floor and latches the door in the wooden peg. Whether John hears this commotion and stays in bed, we may never really know. Patsy now has hours to craft this ransom note with gloves on. She cleans the Maglite flashlight and its batteries, or there's 2 of these flashlights and Patsy rids one of them. Hence, no fingerprints on the Maglite found in the kitchen. Remember, when she has hours to clean and plan up and strategize. And in these types of situations, like in fights or death-defying moments, seconds feel like minutes and minutes feel like forever. Again, a religious trance, a rage state, a fugue state. We may never really know what Patsy did afterwards, and also may never really know John's full involvement in the murder and or cover-up. Once Patsy is comfortable with the staging and cleanup, she calls 911 at 5:52 a.m., and the rest is American history.
Well, Chris, I got to tell you, I appreciate your investigative work, but on this one, I have to respectfully tell you that it's absurd to think that a mother would do something so vile to the daughter she loved.
And I'll quote one of my favorite movies, Zodiac, and a case that I had worked for a long time too. Just because you don't believe it doesn't mean it's not true.
Chris, thank you for coming in today. This was heavy. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.